today's live chat about a historical theme. I should have done this earlier, and for the 90th anniversary of the Nazi seizure of power. It wasn't really a seizure of power, there was handed power on a platter. I wanted to do a series of videos. Unfortunately, two things happened. I got ill, which really stopped me doing things as I would like to have done, and also I've started a new a project for the day job, so that sort of made it somewhat difficult. However, there's one thing above all I did really want to talk about, and that is about the general strike, or not really a general strike, which occurred on the 30th of January 1933. Now, this is a live chat, so you can ask anything you want during the presentation, but it may be that I answer the questions at the end. Now, this is a video which would be much better off being a normal video, because there will be maps. Sorry, there won't be maps in this, because I don't know how to put them up when I'm doing a live, but maybe sometime in the future I will do a proper video on this, rather than just sort of more or less speaking with some disjointed notes that I have made, so I try not to forget anything appropriate section. Now, so on the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor in what can only be termed a sort of a right-wing political machinations, backstabbing, spite. All of these things came together within the German political elite. And this was the reason why Hitler effectively came to power, despite the fact that in the previous election, his party had lost 2 million votes, and could have been seen to have been in a bit of a decline. So he was appointed Chancellor on this day. Now, on the 13th of March, 1920, there was an attempt to overthrow the German government, and the leader of this attempted coup d'etat was General Walther von Lüttwitz, and he was supported by World War I hero Erich Ludendorff, who had effectively run Germany in the latter part of the First World War. However, the name of this putsch was given to one Wolfgang Kapp, became known as the Kapp Putsch, and he was a civil servant. And so now what happened during this putsch on the 13th of March 1920 was that the government fled from Berlin, and but there was a general strike throughout the entire country, and this effectively, after only 4 days, brought the putsch down so that the government could return to Berlin and take over as though nothing had happened. As a result, though, of the putsch, there was what was a communist revolt in the Ruhr area, which then the government had to put down, using, in some cases, the very same putschists which had tried to overthrow it only a few weeks earlier. So the question is organized labor was able to a certain extent to contribute to the overthrow of the Kaiser in 1918. It was able to stop the Kapp Putsch in 1920, but when the danger was so much greater in 1933, why was organized labor unable to do anything about Hitler? There was one solitary place where something was done. This is a place called Mössingen. Mercingen is located to the south of Tübingen in Württemberg, today Baden-Württemberg, because after the war, Baden and Württemberg were amalgamated. Mercingen was a small town of around 4,500 inhabitants or thereabouts, and it was dominated by the textile industry, and there were 3 main factories there. And what happened was that here there was a general strike. That's the word it's become to be known as. Now, last month I was at a trade fair in Stuttgart, and this is a tourist event. And there was, because it was in Stuttgart, there was a number of places, small places from Baden-Württemberg. And there was a little stand there from Mercingen, which really sort of impressed me. And not only impressed me, but it was also, they were going to celebrate the 90th anniversary. And so they'd arranged a number of happenings for this, people making speeches, and some people talking about what had actually happened during this general strike. Unfortunately, I said I was going to go, but then I didn't make it because of other reasons. Well, I wasn't ill then, but the other thing I've started, the other project I've started doing. So yeah, but I would have found that, I think, most interesting. In 1932. In the elections, the two main... The thing about... Sorry, the internet appears to have gone off then. The thing about the Communist Party is the following, is that even somebody like myself, who was a hardcore anti-communist hawk maybe in the 80s, but you have to bear in mind, in 1933, lots of negative things that the communists did weren't yet known. So the Stalin's massacres, knowing that they hadn't yet happened, never mind anything else. A lot of the bad publicity that the communists got in the Soviet Union was due to the fact that communist crimes were reported during the Russian Civil War, but the far greater amount of white crimes largely went unheard of. And also it needs to be borne in mind that the people who owned the newspapers and thus the means of mass media were those who could be losers by a communist revolution. The fact that communism itself as an economic theory makes absolutely no sense perhaps wasn't appreciated as much then as it is now. In Germany, the Communist Party was the one which, more than any others, sort of opposed the Nazis, and there would be the communists and the Nazis fighting each other in the streets. Although, and this needs to be very clearly pointed out, there was a strike of public transport in Berlin not long before Hitler actually came to power, and the communists and the Nazis together, they stood on the same picket lines. And this, of course, didn't do much to endear the Nazis to some of their big business backers when Hitler and Goering and Hjalmar Schacht tried to get money from them, or Franz von Papen as well. So there was this fear amongst the business community of the communists, but there's also a fear of the Nazis as well. The Communist Party was banned effectively as a result of the Reichstag fire, which took place at the end of February 1933. And so this effectively decapitated the Communist Party and stopped them actually being much use to the resistance against Hitler. Now, there was, of course, the communists did, though, actually make an appeal for people to go on strike. As a result of Hitler being appointed Chancellor, there's one person in particular, and whose name now escapes me, but it'll come back before long, and who made it. But there's only one place where this was actually listened to, and that was in Mössingen. So, Albert Buchmann, I think he was a communist deputy, and he called for a strike and to overthrow or stop Hitler coming to power, as that had been done in against the Kapp Putsch. So in Mercingen itself, on the 30th of January 1933, there was a group of some 200 people workers who gathered together, and they decided that they would do something about Hitler being appointed Chancellor. Now, if you look at the map, you can see where Berlin is. Today, they're at opposite ends of the country. Of course, now Germany's much smaller than it was in 1933. But it's a very long distance between the two. And at this meeting, there was agreement amongst the people who actually turned up that the following day that they would actually do something and try to get other factories nearby to actually strike. So and they went then, after they had their meeting, they went out into the streets and they demonstrated, and they started shouting things which were anti-Nazi and all the rest of it. But now on the 31st of January 1933, so it's Hitler's first day in office, so it was point of 30th of January, there were Nazis parading in the streets in Berlin on that night. So when it's these SA, the SA was parading in the streets of Berlin, it was largely communists and people, anti-Nazis, were out in the streets in Mössingen. And so on the morning of 31st of January, Martin Meyer, who was the one of the strike leaders, he managed to get one of the local Communist Party heads to come from Reutlingen, which is not so far away, to give some kind of support. Reutlingen is today I'd say more or less really it's this light industry. So it's a suburb, I would say, of Stuttgart. Not just light industry, sorry, there's a car industry there as well. The people there met in a gym where they'd met the previous night, and initially there was about 100 people there turned up, and their decision then was they would try and get the factories in Mercingen to come out on strike. Obviously they're thinking that people throughout Germany will be out on strike as well. Now the first company that did this, they were workers largely from a company called Pausa, P-A-U-S-A. And Pausa was a weaving mill. They wove colors, and therefore they had a vote there as to what to do. And the thing is, even in this factory, it wasn't a very clear-cut vote. There were parts of the factory who were happy to go to try to do something, but not everyone was. It has to be remembered, of course, that the depression was very strong in Germany. People are losing a day's pay. This would be really quite a large chunk out of their income, particularly if people are using a very large percentage of their income to buy food with. This could mean that they could go short on food or go short on something else. So it didn't really have that much of a margin of security. Now by about 12:45 on that day, one of these parts of the factory, the majority was for a strike, but a second part of the factory wasn't. And and the strike. Now, this factory was owned by the brothers Arthur and Felix Lohenstein, who were Jewish, and they clearly had an interest in making sure that Hitler didn't come to power, and therefore they were quite they approved of the vote, and they give the workers time off for the afternoon. So in this case, the workers didn't have to worry about losing a day's pay. Now, but what then happened was that these workers from the Pausa plant went to the next plant, which was a plant called Merz, which manufactured jerseys, jumpers, and others who joined these demonstrations. And so by the time it got to the Merz plant, there were around 600 people. So they got there around 2 in the afternoon. The strikers got into the factory, they occupied the premises, and they had a number of arguments, but they managed to persuade the workers in the weaving room to switch a sewing facility to come out as well. Now, the people who were sewing, they were almost entirely women, and they refused. And so it seems that there was a lot of arguing, and of the company. It was his company, it has his name. He rang the mayor of Mössingen, a person called Karl Yagi, and he told him what was happening at the factory. and requested police assistance. In Germany, today is the same. Unlike in other countries, the police is to a large extent it's locally organized. Now, Karl Yagi, he wasn't prepared to send the police, and he said, "Look, leave it. Things will all calm down." So what Merz did then is he went over his head, and he requested that police come from Reutlingen, from another town, to actually do it. And at the same time, Merz also telephoned and informed them what was happening at his company. So there seems that these arguments and fights in the Merz factory went on for an hour. The demonstrators then, which were at least 800 people, then went to Burkhardt company. The management had been warned by Merz, and the factory gates were closed. Having said that, some 50 to 60 demonstrators managed to get into the plant, and there were a lot of arguments, and some people tried to force open the gates. They were showing red flags, and one or two of the company workers did stop working. And having said that, the strike committee, which had taken them to this point, decided not to actually try and force their way into the plant and to make them actually stop work. Now, then, Reutlingen. And this must have been the signal that they then realized that there wasn't a general strike throughout Germany. If the police could come from another town, they should have been doing their thing at the local fighting the workers in Reutlingen, not coming there. And so now this must have been a great disappointment for them. It's not like today, of course, when the strikers wouldn't have had access to telephones even. So what happened as a result? The police then attacked the strikers, although they were heavily outnumbered, and so they tried to identify some. And many of the strikers then sort of ran away. Now the consequences though started coming that evening. Now there were arrests in Mössingen and the villages around there, such as places like Nere and Thalheim, and a place called Belsen. It's not the same Belsen as the concentration camp. The concentration camp was in the north, and this is a village called Belsen near there. And so many of those who were strikers from the Merz company were dismissed without notice and immediately. And criminal proceedings were later brought against 98 of those workers who had been identified by the police, and most of these charges were for breach of the police. 7 of the accused were considered ringleaders. They ended up in the court in Stuttgart on charges of preparing to commit high treason in conjunction with aggravated breach of the peace. And so there's 1 or 2 people I can mention here. Jakob Stolz, who was then 34 years old. He died in 1975. He'd been formerly a social democrat until 1922, and he switched to the Communist Party, and he was a leading member of the Communist Party in Mercingen. Jakob Tektor, who was then 25, he died in 2010 at the age of 102. He was a painter, and he was an activist in a local local Communist Party and in the sports organizations. And he had defaced a wall during the 1932 Reichstag election, saying whoever votes for Hitler is voting for war. There was one of the members of the Mercingen Municipal Council, Hermann Iron. He represented the SPD, the Social Democratic Party, and then later the Communist Party. And he, in fact, had been the chairman of the local Communist Party until in the early to mid 1920s. So 77 men and 3 women were sentenced to prison terms of between 3 months and 2.5 years by the judiciary. And it needs to be pointed out that the judiciary had not yet been Nazified as such. So it was still largely independent. of course, with the in time that the judiciary came completely under Nazi control. You can see a video I did actually about the People's Court, amongst others I've done on this theme. There were some people though, such as the Fritz Vandal, who was a Reutlingen municipal council leader. He ended up with a 4.5-year imprisonment. He was kept in solitary confinement, and as soon as he was released from prison, he was arrested again for being an opponent of National Socialism. So he was then what was called protective custody. He was kept in a Gestapo prison in Welzheim for 5 months, and then he was ended up in Dachau, and he stayed there until 1943. He was released from Dachau in 1943, and he joined a penal battalion 999, and he served in that until the end of the war, and the chance of surviving the penal battalion was not particularly large. So obviously, the thing is, there's very few people are aware of this strike. I mean, I've talked to a number of people about it, and I know that no one's actually heard of it. And I think obviously the Nazis kept it a secret, and so maybe the reasons why others, or maybe just such a small thing. Now, as far as the people who owned the company, Powers, the Lernstein brothers, they were forced, like many other Jewish business owners, to actually sell their factory at well below the value. But the fact it was, at least though, they did manage to survive the war. They escaped the United Kingdom. They came back to Germany after liberation, and they were able to get the factory back. The thing is that all of the ringleaders as such did actually survive of the strike, and some of them even became in positions of local power afterwards, when this area of Germany was occupied by the French after the Second World War. And for example, Jakob Stolz, he was appointed provisional mayor of Mössingen, and today there's even a square in Mercingen which is named after him. And there were other people as well who the French actually did appoint to positions of power. So anyway, so that is a one thing I was going to do a video on, a proper video rather than just talking like this. But anyway, so those of you who actually listen, thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that of interest. I might do the video one day, and then I can put more details in, and things which not just things which are coming largely off the top of my head. I'm particularly interested in the resistance to National Socialism in Germany, and it needs to be pointed out that this myth that Hitler won the election, Hitler did not win an election. He took power, it was handed to him by the establishment of the time, and he then denied the rights through the Reichstag fire decree. They denied communists and social democrats the rights to be in parliament. He won an election because so he didn't even win the election, but the March 1933 elections were the Nazis gained votes through intimidation, the fact that people thought their votes were being checked, that because the Prussian police was in the hands of Hermann Goering. And so it was fear which brought Hitler to power. Then we had the Enabling Act, which in itself, which gave Hitler power to for dictatorial rule, which itself was, although partially legal in theory under the Weimar Constitution, but not in the way in which it was applied, by denying people who were likely to vote against it access to parliament. So Hitler did seize power after this day, but he initially had it granted to him on a tray. Anyway, Thanks very much for listening. So all the best from me. As you can see, I've got my new home here, and this is the first video I've done a live chat on this channel in my new home. So thanks very much, and all the best from me in Germany. Bye for now.